Sometimes the smallest slip of the tongue can spiral into the funniest situations, and tonight's story is exactly about that. Picture this. I was trying to make a good impression, trying to show my wife's best friend what a polite, reliable husband I could be. And then, well, let's just say I managed to call her by entirely the wrong name. Now, before we get into the comedy of errors, let me invite you to make yourself comfortable. Grab a blanket, pour yourself a cup of tea, and settle in. And while you're here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our cozy corner of bedtime laughter. You can even drop a comment later to tell me about the funniest name mix-up you've ever had. Trust me, I'll need the solidarity after this tale. So let me tell you what happened. The day I met my wife's best friend and promptly called her the wrong name. The day started like any other Saturday. Quiet, peaceful, full of promise. I had my coffee mug in one hand and the morning paper in the other. I was planning a slow day. The kind of day where you wear socks but no shoes, and you only move if the kettle whistles. Then my wife casually dropped a sentence into the room. "By the way," she said, "you'll meet my best friend today. I don't know if you've ever had hot coffee suddenly feel cold, but I have." Right then. Now, I like to think I'm a decent conversationalist. I can talk about the weather. I can talk about sports. I can even talk about how the weather affects sports. But meeting my wife's best friend, that's different. That's a high-stakes diplomatic mission. I put my mug down. "Your best friend?" "Yes," she said. "We've known each other for 30 years. She's coming over this afternoon." I nodded, like this was perfectly fine. Inside, my brain was quietly screaming. See, best friends are different from regular friends. You can't just smile and nod. You have to impress them. You have to pass the silent test. Is this person worthy of my friend? And there's no second chance if you fail. I decided to prepare. Step 1. Learn her name. "What's her name again?" I asked. "Lisa," my wife said. Lisa. Lisa. Remember it. Simple enough, right? 4 letters. Easy to remember. At least it should have been. I repeated it silently. "Lisa. Lisa. Lisa." I said it in my head like I was chanting. "Lisa. Lisa. Lisa." Then, for some reason, my brain added an extra syllable. Elisa. Then it tried out Linda. Then it wandered into Laura. It was like my mind had a little name roulette wheel, and none of the slots were correct. I told myself it was fine. I had hours to get it right, hours to lock it in. I went back to my coffee, but every time I sipped, I whispered her name in my head again, like I was practicing for a spelling bee that could decide the fate of my marriage. Then my wife added, "Oh, and don't say anything weird." That's the problem. When someone tells you not to say anything weird, your brain instantly fills up with the weirdest possible sentences. Mine started generating them immediately. "So how's the weather in your refrigerator? Do you believe in squirrels? Is that a hat, or are you just happy to see me?" I shook my head to clear it. I was going to be fine. I decided to make a mental plan for the meeting. Step 1. Greet politely. Step 2. Smile, but not too much. Too much smiling makes people think you either have secrets or dental pain. Step 3. Say her name correctly. Once. Confidently. Like I'd known it my whole life. It was foolproof, or so I thought. The morning drifted by. I did little things to keep busy, read the paper, moved the same 3 items on the kitchen counter back and forth, checked the fridge as if snacks might magically appear. Around noon, my wife reminded me, "Lisa will be here at 3. She's really looking forward to meeting you." "Great," I said, with the same tone people use when they hear their dentist is running on schedule. I decided to rehearse one more time. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. "Hello, Lisa. Nice to meet you." Lisa, it's so good to finally meet you. Lisa, I've heard so much about you. Perfect, crisp, professional. I looked like a man ready for anything. Then, for no reason, my reflection blurted, "Hi, Linda." I froze. This was not good. By 2:45, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. The dog was asleep. The TV was off. My mind was running laps around the name Lisa, like it was training for the Olympics. My wife popped in. "You ready?" "Ready," I said. And I meant it, or at least I thought I did. I had no idea that in less than 15 minutes, all that careful preparation was going to fall apart in one single, very loud, very wrong word. At 2:58, the doorbell rang. Now, the sound of a doorbell is usually innocent. It means mail, or a package, or someone selling solar panels you don't want. But today, it meant judgment. My wife leapt up. "That's her," she said. Her tone had the same urgency people use when shouting, "That's the winning lottery number." I followed her to the door like a man being escorted to a job interview he didn't apply for. The door opened. There she was, Lisa. She was smiling, carrying a small gift bag and wearing a scarf that looked like it had been spun from a rainbow's dreams. My brain took all of this in. It processed every detail except the one that mattered most, her actual name. My wife said, "Lisa, this is my husband." And that's when my mouth betrayed me. "Hi, Linda," I said. I heard it. She heard it. My wife heard it. Somewhere, I think even the dog heard it. There was a pause, a long pause. The kind of pause where you could almost hear distant crickets if the crickets were whispering. Did he just call her Linda? Lisa blinked. My wife blinked. I blinked twice for good measure, in case blinking was contagious. "Oh," I said quickly. "I mean Lisa." "Of course, Lisa. My brain just, took the scenic route to your name." Lisa laughed politely. That's the kind of laugh people give when they're not sure if they should be offended or just impressed by your boldness. My wife smiled in a way that said, "We will talk about this later." We stepped aside to let her in. I tried to redeem myself. "Lisa, it's great to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you." "Hopefully good things," she said. "Oh yes," I said. "All good. And none of them involved anyone named Linda." She smiled. But I could tell this was going to be one of those things she remembered forever. We moved to the living room. I offered her tea, coffee, or water. She chose tea. I went to the kitchen to prepare it, which gave me exactly 90 seconds to internally scream at myself in peace. I poured boiling water into the mug. My thoughts boiled right along with it. Why Linda? Why? Out of all the names in the universe, why that one? I brought her tea back. She thanked me, using my name correctly, which felt like a tiny victory for her team. The conversation began. They talked about old times. I nodded along, laughing when it seemed appropriate. But the wrong name moment sat between us like an uninvited third guest. At one point, Lisa said, "Remember that time in college?" And I nearly blurted out, "Yes, Linda, I mean, Lisa, yes." But I bit my tongue so hard I nearly swallowed it. 15 minutes in, I realized something important. No matter how much charm, wit, or tea I offered, I was now the guy who called her Linda. That was my permanent title in her mental files. And deep down, I knew that someday, when my wife and Lisa were talking about me, the sentence would begin with, the first time we met, he called me Linda. Lisa sipped her tea. She did it with the elegance of someone who had probably taken a tea etiquette class. I, on the other hand, was gripping my coffee mug like it was a life preserver, and I was lost at sea. My wife was in full storytelling mode. So, remember that summer we worked at the bookstore? She said. Lisa laughed. Oh, yes, that's when we... I nodded like I'd been there, which I hadn't. My nodding was purely decorative. They traded stories. I learned two important things. One, they had an endless supply of shared memories. Two, none of them involved me, which was probably good for my legal record. I decided to contribute. You know, my wife once told me about the time you both went camping, and Lisa's face lit up. Oh, yes, that was the year we got lost. Yes, I said. She said you were... I hesitated, my brain suddenly suspicious of every name I knew. Quite the navigator, she grinned. You could say that. I smiled back, relieved. For a moment, I thought I might escape without another naming disaster. Then my wife's phone buzzed. She got up to take the call in the other room, and that's when it happened. Lisa looked at me. So how long have you and, known each other? She was clearly fishing for a specific timeline, and I, thinking I was clever, decided to give her a playful answer. Oh, Linda! I froze. There it was. Again, her eyes widened. I immediately backpedaled. Lisa! I meant Lisa! I don't even know why my mouth keeps doing that. Maybe it's muscle memory from some other Linda I met once. Her smile tightened. Interesting. I wanted to sink into the couch and never be found. When my wife returned, Lisa said sweetly, "Your husband has called me Linda twice now." My wife raised an eyebrow at me like she was trying to see straight through to my soul. I laughed nervously. It's just a brain glitch, like when you put the milk in the cupboard instead of the fridge. Except milk doesn't have feelings, Lisa said. Touché. For the next half hour, I sat there hyper-aware of every syllable I spoke. I avoided her name entirely. I became the world's most committed pronoun user. Would you like more tea? Do you take sugar? That's funny. You are funny. Finally, the visit wound down. My wife walked Lisa to the door. I followed, ready to redeem myself with a flawless goodbye. It was wonderful meeting you, Lisa, I said carefully, like I was defusing a bomb. She smiled. You too, Larry. I froze. My name isn't Larry, not even close. She winked. Revenge was complete, and with that, she was gone. The door had barely clicked shut behind Lisa when my wife turned to me. Larry, she said. She started it, I replied. My wife crossed her arms. You called her Linda twice. I raised my hands in surrender. Yes, but only because my brain is a junk drawer. Things get stuck in there, wrong things, like that screwdriver we can't find. She didn't laugh. This was serious business. You know, she said, Lisa is my oldest friend. This is the first time you've met her. And now she thinks you can't remember her name. I nodded. It's not that I can't remember it, I just sometimes refuse to. Her stare did not soften. Okay, fine, I said. It's a glitch, like a software bug. I'll patch it. She sighed. It's not software. It's my best friend's name. I followed her into the kitchen. She began unloading the dishwasher like it had personally offended her. I'll make it right, I said. How? She asked. You going to send her flowers that say, "Sorry I called you Linda"? That's actually not a bad idea, I said. Or maybe a mug. World's best Lisa, definitely not Linda. She closed the dishwasher a little too hard. Just be normal next time we see her. Define normal, I said. Say her name correctly, she replied. It sounded easy enough, in theory. That night, I lay in bed thinking about names. Why Linda? Did I once know a Linda who secretly installed a mental pop-up ad in my head? Or was it because Lisa and Linda both start with lie and my brain was lazy? I decided it was the latter, which meant I just had to overwrite the file. So I whispered to myself in the dark, Lisa. Lisa, Lisa. Are you chanting? My wife asked sleepily. Yes, I said. It's called name reprogramming. She groaned. Please stop before I start calling you Larry. The next morning, I woke up determined. I made coffee. I wrote Lisa on a sticky note and put it on the fridge. I even set an alarm on my phone that just said Lisa in all caps. When my wife came into the kitchen, she looked at the fridge, then at me. You're insane. Insanely prepared, I corrected. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. Lisa, the alarm read. I nodded in satisfaction. The plan was working. Then my wife's phone rang. It was Lisa. She wanted to invite us to dinner. My wife put her on speaker. We'd love to, my wife said. I froze. A second meeting. Too soon. I needed more training time. Lisa's voice was cheerful. Great, Friday at 7. I opened my mouth to say, sounds good, Lisa. But what came out was, sounds good, Shh. Ah. There was a pause. Then laughter. From both women. This was going to be a long week. Friday came fast. Too fast. I'd practiced all week. Lisa, Lisa, Lisa. I said it while brushing my teeth. I said it while making toast. I even said it to the mailman, who now thinks I'm in love with someone named Lisa. My wife seemed calm. That scared me more than if she'd been glaring. Calm meant she was confident I would mess up again, and she had already planned her I told you so speech. We left the house at 6:40. I drove carefully, no sudden turns. I didn't want to jostle the name out of my brain. On the way, I repeated my mantra, Lisa, Lisa, Lisa. Please stop, my wife said. You're going to make it weird before we even get there. We pulled into Lisa's driveway. I took a deep breath. I was ready. Lisa opened the door. She looked friendly. Too friendly, like a person who's about to test you. Hi, she said, come in. Hi, Lisa, I replied. Nailed it. First try. We took off our coats. Lisa led us into the living room. Her husband, Mark, was there. He shook my hand. I didn't have to remember his name, which was a relief. We sat down. Lisa offered drinks. I asked for water, because wine might loosen my tongue in all the wrong ways. So, Lisa said, how's your week been? Good, I said. I didn't mention that most of it had been dedicated to remembering her name. That would make me sound insane. Dinner smelled good. Roast chicken, garlic bread, a salad so green it looked photoshopped. We moved to the dining table. Lisa poured wine for my wife and Mark. She handed me water. I thanked her, by name. Thanks, Lisa. Mark complimented the chicken. Lisa smiled and said, thank you, Larry. My fork froze mid-air. She did it on purpose. She'd called me Larry. She was getting revenge. My wife covered her mouth to hide a smile. Mark looked confused. I decided to play it cool. No problem, Linda, I said without thinking. Gasps all around. I had undone a week of training in one slip. Lisa laughed so hard she almost spilled her wine. My wife shook her head. Mark just kept eating. Apparently, he'd seen worse. I smiled weakly. Force of habit, I said. Except it's not a habit because I've only met you twice, which somehow makes it worse. Lisa waved her hand. It's fine, she said. But the sparkle in her eyes told me this was not over. Dinner carried on, sort of. The chicken was good, the garlic bread was better, but every few bites Lisa would smile at me like a cat that knew where the can opener was. So, Larry, she said casually, what do you do for work? I didn't correct her. I figured at this point letting it slide was the safest option, but my wife coughed pointedly. His name is not Larry, she said. Lisa gasped, hand to her chest. Oh, I'm so sorry, she said. Of course it isn't. It's Leonard, right? Mark looked at her like she just said the moon was made of cheese. My wife glared. I stabbed a piece of chicken and chewed it longer than necessary. Dinner conversation limped along. Mark tried to talk about football. Lisa brought up a book club she was starting. I nodded and smiled like a man at a parole hearing. At one point, Lisa offered me more potatoes. "Sure," I said. She handed me the bowl and whispered, "You can call me Linda if you want." I almost choked on a carrot. We made it to dessert without further disasters. Chocolate cake, moist, rich, dangerous for shirts. I thought we were in the clear. But then my wife went to the kitchen to help Lisa get coffee. That left me alone with Mark. Mark leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, "Lisa's been telling that wrong name story all week. She loves it." I forced a laugh. "Great," I said, glad to be material. He nodded. "She has a good memory for these things, brings them up years later." That was not comforting. The women returned with coffee. We sipped in silence for a few moments. Then Lisa said, "So, Leonard," my wife dropped her spoon. Mark sighed. I smiled weakly. "Sure, Leonard works," I said. We wrapped up the evening soon after. Coats on, goodbyes exchanged, hugs that were a little too tight, like Lisa was imprinting the moment into my rib cage. In the car, my wife didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. Finally, she said, "You lasted almost 20 minutes before messing up." "That's a record." I shrugged. "Progress," I said. She smiled despite herself. "I think she likes you." I shook my head. "She likes tormenting me. There's a difference." When we got home, I made tea and promised myself I'd never forget Lisa's name again. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before I called her Linda again. The next week, my wife told me Lisa was dropping by. She said it casually, like she was announcing the weather, but I heard the warning bells. "Dropping by?" I asked. "Yes," she said, "just for a few minutes. She's bringing me a book." A book. Right. That's exactly what people bring when they're plotting social revenge. I did what any sensible man would do. I hid. Not in an obvious way. I didn't crawl under the bed or wedge myself in the closet. I simply happened to be in the garage, reorganizing a box of extension cords that hadn't been touched since 2004. The garage was my safe zone. Smelled like paint thinner and lawn clippings. Not exactly Lisa's natural habitat, but my wife is clever. She found me. "You can't avoid her forever," she said. "Forever is ambitious," I replied. "I'm aiming for Tuesday." Before I could argue further, the doorbell rang. It had a cheerful chime, but in that moment, it sounded like the soundtrack to doom. I followed my wife to the door. Lisa stood there, holding a thick paperback and a smile. "Hello, Leonard," she said. I sighed. Never mind. "Hi, Lisa." She handed the book to my wife, then turned to me. "I thought I'd save you from embarrassing yourself next time," she said. "Oh?" I asked. "Yes, I wrote my name on the first page. You can practice." I glanced at the book. In bold black ink, Lisa, underlined twice. We went to the living room. Tea was made, cookies appeared. Lisa sat on the couch like she owned the place. She asked me about my week. I gave safe, boring answers. No openings for jokes, no risky details. Halfway through a sip of tea, she said, "By the way, Leonard, I told my book club about you." I set my cup down carefully. "Oh?" "Yes, they think you're charming and terrible with names." My wife laughed. Lisa smiled sweetly. I considered moving to another country. When she finally left, my wife closed the door and grinned. "She's going to be fun for you." "Fun," I said flatly. Lisa didn't stay gone for long. 2 days later, my wife announced she'd be stopping by again. "She forgot her umbrella last time," my wife said. I frowned. She didn't bring an umbrella. She said she did. I knew what was happening. This was not about an umbrella. This was reconnaissance. Lisa was circling back like a hawk that spotted something shiny in the grass. The umbrella was just her pretext. I wouldn't have been surprised if she turned up with binoculars and a clipboard, but this time, I vowed, I would be prepared. No mistakes, no panic-induced name-guessing. I would be calm, collected, and above all, charming. I even prepared a short list of safe, non-dangerous conversation topics. 1. Weather, always safe unless it leads to climate change debates. 2. Gardening, nothing controversial about tomatoes. 3. The universal tragedy of trying to find a decent avocado. When Lisa arrived, I was ready. She came through the door with the smooth confidence of someone who has never once said, "Wait, what's your name again?" "Hello, Leonard," she said. I smiled and replied, Never mind. Good to see you, Lisa." She didn't seem fazed. She handed my wife a large tote bag. "This is for you," she said. Inside, a bottle of wine, a jar of olives, and something swaddled in about a mile of bubble wrap. "What's that?" I asked. Lisa grinned. "A gift for you." I peeled back the plastic. It was a mug, not just any mug. A large, bright white ceramic mug with bold black letters. "Hello, my name is Lisa." My wife burst into laughter. Lisa looked very pleased with herself. I held up the mug and said, "Well, at least I'll remember what to call my coffee now." We all moved to the kitchen. Lisa sat at the table like it was a throne, and the chair had been hand-carved for her. She doesn't just drink tea, she studies it, she swirls it. I'm half convinced she waits for the steam to spell out messages. "Busy week?" she asked casually. I nodded, reorganized the garage, alphabetized the extension cords. Her brow furrowed. "Alphabetized?" "Yes," I said. "By color." "That's not the alphabet," she replied. "It is in my garage," I said. We got onto the topic of home projects. She claimed she could hang a shelf without making a single measurement. I expressed doubt. She countered with, "You probably can't make a sandwich without misplacing the mustard." My wife laughed so hard she nearly inhaled her tea. I wasn't sure whether to feel insulted or impressed. Halfway through her cup, Lisa set it down, rested her chin on her hand, and said, "So, who did you think I was that first day?" The question landed like a dropped bowling ball. I could feel my wife's eyes on me. It was a trap. A conversational minefield. One wrong step and my embarrassment would be enshrined in Lisa's stories forever. I took a slow sip of tea, hoping the right answer might be hiding in the bottom of the cup. "I honestly don't remember," I said finally. Lisa's smile widened. "That's convenient," my wife jumped in. "He thought you were my cousin." Lisa tilted her head. "Which cousin?" I coughed into my cup. The truth was, I had no idea. When she first walked in that day, I had panic-labeled her as probably a Susan and just ran with it. Lisa didn't press further, but her smirk told me she wasn't done with the subject. She finished her tea, collected her suspiciously forgotten umbrella, and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned back. "By the way, Leonard," she said, I began. She cut me off. "Just checking if you'd correct me." Then she winked and left. When the door closed, I turned to my wife. "She's not done with me," I said. "No," my wife agreed. "She's just getting started." Lisa's second visit should have been the end of it. The mug, the umbrella, the sly wink at the door. That was the perfect exit line. But no. 2 days later, she was back again. This time, she arrived unannounced. The doorbell rang just as I was halfway through reorganizing the fridge. I had every condiment lined up like soldiers in a very underfunded army. The mayonnaise was in a heated territorial dispute with the pickles. I opened the door, and there she was, Lisa. No tote bag, no umbrella, no official reason to be there, which made it far more suspicious. "Hello," she said. I said, "Do I need to start keeping a guest log?" She breezed past me into the living room without answering. My wife came in from the backyard. "Oh, Lisa," she said. "What a surprise." Lisa grinned. "I was just in the neighborhood. That's what spies say in movies before stealing nuclear codes." She sat down and began scanning the room, not looking at anything in particular, but somehow observing everything. Her eyes flicked over my neatly stacked magazines, the perfectly symmetrical throw pillows, and the box of garage sale items I'd been meaning to take out for the last 3 months. I felt like I was being silently graded. "So," Lisa said, "I was telling my neighbor about you yesterday." I froze. That's never a good sign. No one ever says, "I was telling someone about you," and follows it with, "and they think you're a delightful, well-adjusted person." My wife raised an eyebrow. "What did you tell them?" Lisa smirked. "That you're married to a man who once called me Susan." Ah, there it was. The incident had officially gone public. I tried to salvage my dignity. "In my defense," I said, "you look like a Susan." She laughed. "Really? I look like a Susan? Do I also look like I own 3 cats and make pottery in my spare time?" I squinted. "Do you?" She leaned back in her chair. "That's classified." We moved on to tea. Lisa always brings her own tea bags, which I think is a subtle power move. It says, "I don't trust your tea, but I'll let you boil the water." I poured the hot water into her cup and asked if she wanted honey. She said yes, but only exactly 1 teaspoon. I gave her 1.5 just to see if she'd notice. She took a sip, paused, and looked at me. 1.5, I nodded. She smiled like she'd just cracked a code. My wife excused herself to take a phone call, leaving me alone with Lisa. That's when the real interrogation began. "So tell me," she said, "what's my middle name?" I froze. The truth is, I didn't know. I had never needed to know. Middle names are like spare keys to sheds you don't own. You just assume they exist but never check. "Elizabeth," I guessed. She shook her head. "Wrong. Want to try again?" "Marie?" "Nope." "Okay, now you're just enjoying this." "Yes," she said. "I am." When my wife came back, Lisa was smiling like she'd just won a silent competition I didn't know we were playing. Eventually, she stood up to leave. As she reached the door, she turned and said, "See you soon, Leonard." I corrected her automatically. "It's," she interrupted. "I know." The door closed behind her and I turned to my wife. "She's going to keep doing that forever, isn't she?" My wife laughed. "Probably." That night I made myself a cup of tea in the "Hello, my name is Lisa" mug. It was both humbling and oddly satisfying. If nothing else, I'd never forget her name again. It all started with a text from my wife. Not a long text, not an emotional text, just 6 words that can rearrange a man's plans, mental state, and possibly his will to live. "Lisa's coming over for dinner." No explanation, no warning, no hint that this decision was negotiable. I texted back, "Why?" She replied, "Because she's my best friend." Which, I admit, is technically a reason. But it's like answering, "Why did you buy a cat?" with, "Because it's furry." It's true, but it doesn't tell you what you're about to be dealing with. By the time I got home, the scene in the house could have been a set from one of those cooking shows where the host is pretending to be calm while the kitchen is on fire behind them. The good tablecloth was out. The plates that we keep wrapped in bubble wrap for special occasions were stacked like porcelain soldiers ready for battle. And the smell, oh, the smell. Garlic, butter, rosemary, and underneath it, that faint aroma of panic that every host knows well. "I need you to set the table," my wife said, without looking up from chopping carrots with the precision of a surgeon operating under a deadline. "Why?" "Lisa doesn't care if the fork is on the left or the right." "That's not the point," she said, thrusting cutlery into my hands. "We're not setting the table for Lisa. We're setting it for the evening." That's when I knew. This dinner wasn't about food. It was about image, and I was part of the image, whether I wanted to be or not. Lisa, of course, was the friend I had accidentally called by the wrong name during our first meeting. Not just the wrong name, Susan. I had etched myself into her memory forever as the guy who thought I was Susan. If this dinner went well, I might upgrade to the guy who makes decent mashed potatoes. If it went badly, I'd drop to the guy who calls people the wrong name and overcooks chicken. At 6:57 p.m., the doorbell rang. Lisa arrived on the dot at 7 o'clock because she strikes me as the type who believes being early is rude and being late is a sign of weakness. She stepped in wearing a navy blue dress that had probably been marketed as something poetic like Midnight Whispers in the catalog. She handed my wife a bottle of wine, the kind with a label that looked expensive enough to make me hold it with both hands. Then she handed me a small paper bag. Inside, a jar of homemade pickles. "Thought you'd like these," she said. It was the politest insult I had ever received. Pickles, in essence, are cucumbers that have been told, "You're fine, but we'd like you better if you were completely different." We sat down to appetizers, bruschetta, my wife's pride and joy. Lisa took one bite, closed her eyes like she was listening to an opera, and said, "Delicious." Then she added, "Almost as good as the ones I had in Rome." Almost, the kind of word that can make a chef feel like they just lost a cooking contest they didn't know they'd entered. I decided to join the conversation before my wife started sharpening her butter knife. "So, Lisa, what have you been up to lately?" I asked, smiling in my most harmless man-making small talk way. She listed her activities like she was reading the titles of books from a shelf. "Work, yoga, learning French." I nodded. "French? Beautiful language." "Yes," she said, "but I don't know any men who speak it fluently." I took a sip of wine and decided not to mention that my high school French consisted entirely of being able to order bread and complain about the weather. When the roast chicken arrived, I was in charge of pouring the wine. Lisa inspected her glass before taking a sip, the way a medieval queen might check for poison. "Nice," she said. I wasn't sure if she meant the wine, my pouring technique, or simply the fact that the glass wasn't chipped. Then my wife, in what can only be described as a marital ambush, brought up the Susan incident. Lisa's eyes lit up like a cat hearing a can opener. "Oh yes," she said, leaning in. "Tell it again." My wife obliged, delivering the story with the flair of a seasoned comedian, complete with exaggerated pauses and eyebrow choreography. Lisa laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. "Honestly," she said, "it's the best thing that's happened to me in months. I've told the story to everyone I know." That's when I realized I wasn't just a man having dinner with my wife's best friend. I was material. Dessert was chocolate mousse, the dessert equivalent of a grand finale. Lisa took one spoonful, set her spoon down, and said, "Perfect." Finally, a win. Then she added, "Almost as good as the one I had in Paris." Almost. As the evening wound down, Lisa thanked us for the meal, hugged my wife, and shook my hand in a way that suggested we'd both endured something together. At the door, she turned and said, "Good night, Leonard." I sighed. She cut me off. I know. The door closed. I turned to my wife. "She likes me," I said, with the optimism of a man ignoring all evidence to the contrary. My wife laughed. "She doesn't hate you." In Lisa's world, that was practically a love letter. The day after the dinner, I was nursing a coffee and the mild trauma of being almost as good at everything when my wife announced, "Lisa loved you." This, I suspected, was like saying a cat loves the couch. They might sit on it occasionally, but they are also fully prepared to claw it to shreds if the mood strikes. "She didn't say she loved me," I pointed out. "She didn't have to," my wife replied, with that mysterious feminine certainty that makes men feel like we missed a chapter in the manual. I was still processing this when my wife added, "She's invited us to her place next week. She says she wants to return the hospitality." Now, normally, when someone says they want to return the hospitality, it means they're going to microwave some lasagna, toss you a paper plate, and call it even. But this was Lisa, the woman who compares dinner to Rome, wine to Tuscany, and dessert to Paris. Her version of hospitality would be elaborate. The week leading up to the dinner was like training for an Olympic event. My wife had a plan, and apparently, I was part of it. "Do not call her Susan," she warned more than once, as if I might do it by reflex. "Wear something decent, not the shirt you call formal, just because it has buttons." "Can I at least loosen up with a drink before we go?" I asked. "Number, you get one drink after we arrive. You're on your best behavior tonight." I briefly considered faking the flu. But the problem with faking the flu is that you have to stay committed to it. And I knew that if I went all in with a fake cough, I'd probably get a real cough out of spite. Lisa's house looked like it had been curated, not lived in. There was art on the walls, the kind where you're not sure if it's abstract or if someone just spilled wine on the canvas but decided to frame it. Her living room had throw pillows that probably cost more than my car tires, each one arranged at an angle that I suspected had been measured with a protractor. She greeted us at the door in a crisp white blouse, a pearl necklace, and that look of satisfaction people get when they know their dishwasher is full of matching wine glasses. The smell inside was dangerous, rich, buttery, garlicky, like she'd hired a French chef to come in and seduce the entire neighborhood via air circulation. Lisa led us to the dining room, where the table looked like it had been staged for a magazine photo shoot. Candles, cloth napkins folded into swans, a centerpiece that seemed to be a combination of flowers, fruit, and something that might have been an exotic gourd. "I've made coq au vin," Lisa announced, which to me sounded less like food and more like a legal term. "It's chicken and wine," my wife whispered to me, which was a relief. At least I knew I wouldn't have to eat anything that still had its eyes. The appetizers arrived, tiny, perfect puff pastry things that looked too delicate to actually eat. Lisa explained what was in them, but honestly, I stopped listening after Gruyere. Because once a cheese has a French name, I know it's going to be delicious and expensive. Dinner conversation began innocently enough. Lisa asked about work. My wife answered. Lisa asked about my hobbies. I mentioned I'd been trying to grow tomatoes. Her eyebrows rose a fraction in pots. "Yes." She smiled in a way that suggested this was adorable, like a toddler wearing a tie. Then came the moment I'd been dreading, the story of how we first met. Apparently, Lisa had decided that telling this story to me in person was still funny. She reenacted the scene, doing an impression of my voice when I'd called her Susan. Her impression sounded like a man who had just woken from a nap inside a moving refrigerator. Everyone laughed, even me, partly to be polite, partly because I couldn't deny it was accurate. Lisa took the opportunity to teach me about the wine she was serving. "This is a Pinot Noir from Burgundy," she said, swirling her glass. "Burgundy," I repeated, swirling mine in imitation. "Notice the nose," she continued. I sniffed. "Smells like wine." My wife kicked me lightly under the table. Lisa smiled politely, as if I had just answered a riddle incorrectly, but she was too gracious to say so. The main course arrived, and I'll admit, it was perfect. The chicken was tender, the sauce was rich, and there were little pearl onions in there that made me wonder why onions don't always come in snack size. "You like it?" Lisa asked, watching me closely. "It's almost as good as the one I had in..." My wife's eyes widened in panic, and I quickly finished. "My dreams." Lisa laughed. My wife looked relieved. I congratulated myself for surviving what I later referred to as the near Paris incident. Dessert was a lemon tart so beautiful, I felt guilty cutting into it. By the time coffee was served, I was relaxed enough to stop worrying about calling anyone the wrong name. Lisa was actually pleasant. Sharp, yes, but not unkind. Maybe she did like me. When we left, she handed me another jar of her homemade pickles. "You liked the last batch, right?" I smiled. "They were unforgettable," which in pickle terms is the highest compliment I can give. As soon as we got home, I loosened my tie and collapsed onto the couch. "Well?" my wife asked. "Well," I said, "if I never have to fold a napkin into a swan again, it'll be too soon." She smiled. "Lisa said you were charming." I nodded. "I'll take it. From Lisa, that's practically a marriage proposal." Lisa had that look when she showed up again, the look of someone who wasn't just stopping by for casual conversation, but for a mission. My wife let her in with that warm, "come in, make yourself at home" tone that wives have when they're absolutely certain you're about to be put through something you didn't agree to. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to sort through the mail, which was really just a cover for staying seated so I wouldn't have to be part of the welcoming committee. Lisa walked in like she'd been here 100 times, gave me a quick nod and said, "Hello again, Leonard." She knew my name by now, and the way she said it was deliberate, like she was slowly tightening a noose made entirely out of politeness. I smiled and said, "Hi, Lisa," because that was the safest option. She carried a tote bag, which I assumed was full of snacks or some mysterious friend-official supplies. My wife immediately peeked inside like a curious raccoon. Out came a bottle of wine, a jar of olives, and something wrapped so heavily in bubble wrap that it could have survived a fall from orbit. "This is for you," Lisa said, pushing it toward me. My wife looked far too excited for this to be good news. I unwrapped the package, and there it was. A white ceramic mug with bold black letters that said, "Hello, my name is Lisa." My wife started laughing so hard she had to lean on the counter for support. I stared at the mug, then looked back at Lisa. She raised her eyebrows as if to say, "This is what victory looks like." "Well," I said finally, "at least I'll know what to call my coffee now." It wasn't my best line, but under the circumstances, I felt it was respectable. We all moved into the kitchen proper. Lisa sat down in a way that suggested she had just been handed ownership papers for the chair. She didn't simply sit, she occupied. My wife put the kettle on, and Lisa folded her hands like someone about to preside over a formal hearing. I poured the tea into 3 mugs, carefully avoiding the new one, and placed them on the table. "Busy week?" Lisa asked. Her tone was casual, but I could tell she was gathering data, mapping my habits, preparing for another pass at figuring out what kind of man mistakes his wife's best friend for someone named Susan or Karen or whatever I'd blurted out that first time. I told her I'd been reorganizing the garage. She asked how many extension cords one person could possibly own. I told her enough to power a small county fair. She seemed both impressed and faintly disturbed. We drifted into small talk. She mentioned she could hang a shelf without measuring. I accused her of lying. She accused me of being the kind of man who could lose the mustard while making a sandwich. My wife laughed, which I knew meant she agreed with Lisa entirely. But then, without warning, Lisa leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand like a detective in the final act of a crime drama. "So," she said slowly, "who did you think I was the first day we met?" The air felt heavier. I could practically hear the ticking of an invisible clock. This was it, the question. The one I had successfully dodged for days. I took a slow sip of tea, buying time. I could feel my wife watching me, waiting to see if I would admit the truth or attempt some elaborate distraction involving a fake coughing fit and perhaps a staged spill. I went, with a middle ground. "I honestly don't remember," I said, trying to sound as if my brain had never once stored such information. Lisa's smirk told me she didn't buy it for a second. "That's convenient," she said, drawing out the last word like it had a hook in it. My wife jumped in. "He thought you were my cousin," she said cheerfully, like she was throwing a log onto an already roaring fire. Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Which cousin?" she asked. I suddenly became very interested in my tea. I coughed. I mumbled something about the steam fogging my glasses, even though I wasn't wearing any. The truth was, I didn't have a specific cousin in mind. I'd just reached into the panicked filing cabinet of my brain and grabbed a generic label. Probably a Susan. Definitely a Susan. That's where I'd left it. Lisa let the matter drop, but not because she was satisfied. I could tell this was the kind of unfinished business that best friends of wives file away for later use, possibly during a holiday gathering when you're surrounded by witnesses and there's no escape. She finished her tea, stood, and picked up her forgotten umbrella from the counter. My wife walked her to the door, and I waved half-heartedly from the kitchen. When the door clicked shut, I turned to my wife. "She's not done with me," I said. My wife didn't even hesitate. "No," she said. "She's just getting started." I looked at the mug still sitting on the table. Its glossy surface caught the light, and the letters seemed to grin at me. "Hello, my name is Lisa." A souvenir from a battle I hadn't realized I'd been fighting until I was already losing. I picked it up, turned it in my hands, and set it back down. I wasn't sure if I should drink from it or bury it in the yard. Saturday mornings in our house are supposed to be sacred. No alarms, no schedules, no, "we need to go pick something up before the store closes." Just me, my coffee, and the slow unraveling of the morning newspaper in an orderless fashion. Comics first, then maybe the headlines, then possibly the crossword if I'm feeling particularly superior. But this Saturday, I awoke to the sound of my wife saying, "We should invite Lisa for brunch." She said it like she was suggesting we take in a stray kitten, except this kitten could talk, judge, and remember every verbal slip I had ever made. I tried to stall. "Brunch? Isn't that for people who wear scarves indoors?" My wife ignored me entirely. She hasn't been over in a while. That was a lie. She'd been over just 3 days ago. I pointed this out, but my wife had already picked up her phone and was texting. By the time I'd made it to the kitchen, Lisa had replied, "Wouldn't miss it." I pictured her grinning as she typed it, possibly already planning to bring another gag gift to torment me. Maybe a t-shirt with my wrong name printed across the front in Comic Sans. I tried to hide in the kitchen, fiddling with the coffee machine like I was calibrating it for a moon landing. My wife, sensing my reluctance, said, "She really likes you, you know." I gave her a look that said, "And by likes, you mean keeps me in a state of permanent social anxiety, right?" She smirked and said nothing. An hour later, Lisa breezed in carrying a box from the fancy bakery downtown. The kind of place where they charge you $8 for something that could easily be mistaken for a dinner roll. but has a French name that makes you feel uncultured for questioning the price. She set the box on the table and announced, "I brought croissants, pain au chocolat, and one thing I forgot the name of, but looked pretty." We all sat down, and I noticed Lisa immediately claimed the mug she'd given me last time. She didn't ask if she could use it. She just poured coffee into it as if to remind me she had left her mark here, both figuratively and literally. Conversation started innocently enough. Travel, weather, the fact that my wife's rosemary plant had died again, despite her insisting she had the touch with herbs. I may have accidentally snorted when Lisa suggested she should try a cactus instead. My wife gave me a warning look, the kind that says, "Careful, you're on thin ice." Then Lisa pivoted. "So, Leonard," she said, and I swear she always puts just a hair too much emphasis on my name. "I've been meaning to ask, how did you and my dear friend here meet?" Now, this should be an easy question for any husband. But in my case, telling our story meant opening the door to my wife's favorite version of events, which involved me spilling a drink on her in public and apologizing so profusely that she finally agreed to go on a date just to shut me up. I tried to give a short and dignified version, but my wife was already off, recounting every detail, including how I'd been so nervous I called the waiter "sir" 3 times in one sentence. Lisa was eating it up like one of her overpriced pastries. She laughed at all the wrong moments, wrong for me that is, and kept making notes in her head, which I could practically see happening in real time. Somewhere between my wife's reenactment of my drink-spilling disaster and Lisa's retelling of the cousin incident from our first meeting, I realized I was essentially being double-teamed in a comedic roast, and I was the only one not laughing. To reclaim some dignity, I changed the subject to home repairs. This was safe ground. Lisa claimed she once fixed a leaky faucet by giving it a good talking to, and I seized the opportunity to mock her method. "Did you also try singing it a lullaby?" I asked. She didn't miss a beat. "No, I saved that for when your wife's rosemary plant died." I couldn't win. When the meal wrapped up, Lisa stood to leave, but then remembered she had something in her bag for me. This was never a good sign. She pulled out a small notebook with "Names to Remember" embossed on the cover. She handed it to me with a perfectly innocent smile. "Just in case you meet any more of my friends," she said. My wife burst out laughing, nearly spilling her coffee. I flipped through the notebook. Every page was blank, which somehow made it worse. It was a joke, yes, but also a challenge. And I knew that no matter what I wrote in it, Lisa would find a way to turn it into ammunition later. After she left, I sat at the table staring at the notebook. My wife wandered back in, still chuckling. "She really does like you," she said again. "You two have a dynamic." Dynamic was one word for it. I preferred ongoing skirmish. Still, I had to admit, in the quiet after Lisa's departure, that the house felt a little less alive without her presence. Sure, she drove me slightly insane, but it was the kind of insanity that kept things interesting, and maybe, just maybe, I'd use that notebook after all. Not for names, of course, but for comebacks. The trouble with Lisa is that she doesn't just exit a conversation when she leaves your house. Oh no. She lingers like the smell of garlic in a small kitchen, still floating around the corners long after the source is gone. I had barely put the Names to Remember notebook down when my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. No words, just a picture of me from brunch, mid-bite, my mouth in an unfortunate shape that made me look like I was about to deliver a passionate speech on the importance of chewing thoroughly. The caption read, "Your profile picture for when you run for local office." I showed it to my wife, who laughed so hard she nearly dropped her tea. She's got a knack for catching. "You at your best," she said, patting my arm. I didn't find it nearly as amusing. I replied with a single word: blocked. Of course, Lisa instantly responded with a screenshot proving I had failed to block her properly. Somewhere between that and the third meme she sent, this one comparing me to a startled meerkat, I realized Lisa's brunch appearances had evolved into something much larger, an ongoing inter-meal performance art piece in which I was the unwilling star. By late afternoon, I was feeling twitchy. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself for another picture or witty jab. I tried going for a walk to clear my head, but halfway down the block, I spotted a woman with a scarf I recognized, Lisa's. My heart rate spiked like I was in a wildlife documentary and had just spotted a predator. Of course, it wasn't Lisa, just someone else who shops in the same overpriced scarf store. But the damage was done. I'd become a man glancing over his shoulder for fear of being humorously ambushed. When I got home, my wife was on the phone with Lisa. I could hear her laughing from the hallway. "Oh, he'll love that," she was saying. I stood in the doorway, eyebrows raised, trying to silently communicate, who is he, and what exactly will he love? My wife mouthed, "Later." Later came suspiciously soon. She hung up and immediately started rummaging in the hall closet, muttering about needing a certain box. Out came an old photo album, the kind with those sticky pages that trap pictures forever. She flipped to a page from my awkward teenage years, a time when my hairstyle could best be described as the unfortunate love child of a mushroom and a Brillo pad. She snapped a quick picture of it with her phone and began typing. I lunged for the device like a man trying to stop a missile launch. "Don't you dare send that to..." But it was too late. The whoosh sound effect went off. My teenage humiliation was now in Lisa's possession. The reply was instantaneous. "This is gold," framing it for my kitchen. By evening, I decided drastic measures were needed. "We need boundaries," I told my wife. "Lisa boundaries." She smirked. "Like what?" "No Lisa on Tuesdays," I nodded vigorously. "Exactly. Or a 3 interactions per week rule. You know, for my mental health." My wife laughed in that way that says, "I love you, but I am absolutely not doing that." Instead, she suggested something far more dangerous. "Why don't you get her back? You're funny when you try." That was both a compliment and a trap. Because, yes, I am funny, but only when the stakes are low and the audience is forgiving. Lisa is neither. Still, the idea of landing a clean shot in our ongoing duel was tempting. I started small. The next morning, I sent her a picture of a rosemary plant in full bloom with the caption, "Proof they can survive." No response for an hour, which was promising. Then came her reply, "That's adorable. Did you Google healthy rosemary for this?" Attached was a zoomed-in screenshot of the image with the Getty Images watermark still visible in the corner. Round 1 to Lisa. But I wasn't ready to surrender. That afternoon, I accidentally left a voice message in our group chat, just a snippet of me humming an unidentifiable tune, a harmless oddity. She bit instantly. "What's that from?" I replied. "It's the song they play when you walk into the wrong party." It was petty, but it felt good. Of course, this opened the door for her counterattack. The next time I opened my fridge, I found a small sticky note on the milk carton that read, "Check the sell-by date on your comebacks." I still have no idea when she had time to plan it. Either she'd stopped by when I wasn't home, or my wife was complicit in a covert operation. Both were equally plausible. By the end of the week, I realized something unnerving. I was starting to look forward to Lisa's shenanigans. The initial dread had morphed into a strange anticipation. It was like living in a sitcom where you know the antagonist will appear at any moment, armed with a one-liner and possibly baked goods. That Sunday, when she texted asking if we were free for a quick coffee, I didn't even groan. I just glanced at my wife and said, "Only if I get to pick the cafe." She raised an eyebrow. "You're planning something?" I didn't deny it. We chose a little place with wobbly tables and mismatched chairs, the kind of spot where the coffee is strong and the lighting makes everyone look slightly suspicious. Lisa arrived wearing a hat so large it could have been rented from a local theater. Sun protection, she claimed. I suspected drama. We sat, we ordered, and I waited for my moment. When the waitress brought our drinks, I looked Lisa dead in the eye and said, "Here you go, Linda." Her reaction was priceless. A full beat of stunned silence, then a slow smile. "Touché," she said. My wife nearly choked on her latte. It wasn't much, but it was a victory. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't a battle I wanted to win outright. The skirmishes, the banter, even the public embarrassment, they'd all become part of the rhythm of our lives. Still, I'm keeping the names to remember notebook handy, just in case. The thing about landing a win against Lisa, even a small one, is that it's like eating a single chip. You tell yourself that one is enough, that you're satisfied, but 5 minutes later, you're elbow deep in the bag, telling your reflection in the microwave door that you can stop whenever you want. After the Linda moment, I was feeling bold. Too bold, perhaps. I'd forgotten that Lisa is a woman who plays the long game. She's not the type to fire back immediately. She prefers to let you think you've triumphed, then return at a moment when your guard is down, usually when you're holding something spillable. That moment arrived on a Wednesday. I was at home, mid-morning, enjoying the rare bliss of a quiet house. My wife was at work, my phone was blissfully silent, and I was making a sandwich that could only be described as structurally ambitious. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Lisa, holding a paper bag and smiling like a cat who'd just discovered the Canary karaoke bar. "I brought muffins," she announced. "Now, I am not foolish enough to reject free baked goods, even from someone who may or may not be plotting my social demise." I invited her in, offered tea, and we sat at the kitchen table. We chatted about nothing: weather, traffic, the tragic decline of local muffin quality. And for a moment, I thought maybe this was just a normal visit. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a glossy, laminated card. It was a mock official name reminder chart, complete with my picture in the corner and a list of names, mine included, with phonetic spellings, suggested nicknames, and a column titled "Avoid Calling Them." Under that last one, next to her name, she'd written in bold red letters, "Not Linda." I laughed so hard I nearly sent muffin crumbs across the table. "You laminate this yourself?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "If something's worth doing, it's worth preserving in a format that can survive coffee spills." It was so ridiculous, I had to respect it. I even pinned it to our fridge, where it quickly became a conversation starter for guests, and annoyingly, a visual reminder of my failed attempt at dominance. But here's the thing. Once you've been publicly roasted via laminated media, you either crawl into a hole of embarrassment or you escalate. I chose escalation. The next Saturday, my wife and I hosted a small dinner party. Lisa was on the guest list, obviously. I decided it was the perfect opportunity to turn the tables. The setup was simple: place cards. I printed them myself on thick, elegant cardstock, the kind that makes you feel like you're attending a royal banquet, even if you're just sitting near a bowl of supermarket potato salad. For everyone else, I used their actual names. For Lisa, I wrote Linda in elaborate cursive, then added a tiny crown doodle above it. I placed it right in front of her seat, angled so she couldn't miss it. When she arrived, she spotted it instantly. There was a long pause. She looked at me, then at the card, then back at me. "You're very brave," she said slowly. My wife tried and failed to hide her grin. Dinner began, and for a while I thought I'd pulled it off. People were laughing, wine was flowing, and Lisa seemed to be taking the Linda thing in stride. Too much stride, as it turned out. Halfway through dessert, she excused herself to the bathroom. When she returned, she carried my Names to Remember notebook. I still don't know how she found it. I keep it hidden in a drawer under old instruction manuals and a tangle of spare charger cords. She placed it on the table and flipped it open to a blank page. "I thought we could update this together," she said sweetly. Then she proceeded to take votes from the table on what my new, easier-to-remember name should be. Suggestions included Mort, Captain Forgetsy, and Dave, which I suppose is easy to remember, but wildly inaccurate. The final tally, however, was unanimous. Chester. And just like that, the name stuck. For the rest of the night, I was Chester. Even my wife joined in, calling across the kitchen, "Chester, could you grab the wine opener?" "The worst part," I answered without thinking. By the time everyone left, I had resigned myself to my fate. Lisa hugged me at the door and whispered, "Good night, Chester." I'm still not sure if it was a victory for her or a mutual acknowledgement that neither of us would ever truly win. The next morning, I found a note taped to the fridge, right above the laminated chart. It read, "P.S. You make a decent Linda, too." I sighed, made myself a coffee, and decided maybe the battle didn't need an end. After all, if you can't beat 'em, and you clearly can't, you might as well keep the game going. Besides, life without a little friendly sabotage would be far too quiet. And I've learned something important. A quiet life is not nearly as fun to tell stories about. So now when Lisa texts, I don't brace for impact. I lean into it. If she sends a photo, I send one back, preferably of her caught mid-blink. If she makes a joke at my expense, I counter with something equally absurd. We've become a sort of comedic Cold War, each side maintaining a healthy arsenal of mildly embarrassing material. It's exhausting, yes, but it's also strangely delightful. And maybe, though I'll deny it if asked, I kind of like being Chester. You know how some days start completely ordinary, and then, without warning, you find yourself in a situation that could have been pulled straight from a sitcom. That was my Tuesday. It began with me sitting at the kitchen table, trying to fix a wobbly chair leg with a butter knife, because, in my mind, that's how resourceful men do things. My wife walked in, took one look, and said, "Please don't ruin my cutlery in the chair." She had that tone, the tone that says, "I'm not even mad yet, but you're dangerously close to earning a full lecture." Before I could defend my engineering genius, the phone rang. My wife picked it up, listened for a moment, then covered the mouthpiece. "It's Lisa," she whispered. "She says it's urgent." Now, when Lisa says something is urgent, it could mean anything from "I've locked myself out of my car" to "I've discovered a squirrel with a human-like face." Either way, you drop what you're doing. I took the phone. "Chester speaking," I said, just to annoy her. There was a pause. "Good," Lisa replied. "You're embracing it. I need you to come with me to the mall, now." "The mall? What's the emergency? A 70% off sale?" "Better," she said. "It's name tag day at the community center booth." I should have hung up right there, but curiosity, and maybe a touch of masochism, got the better of me. 30 minutes later, we were standing in the middle of the mall, surrounded by cheerful volunteers handing out free sticky name tags. Lisa grabbed one, wrote Linda in giant block letters, and slapped it on my chest before I could react. "Now," she said, "we blend in and pretend this is perfectly normal." I tried to remove it, but she stopped me. No, commitment is key. You've got to own it." So, for the next hour, I wandered the mall as Linda. Shop clerks greeted me with polite confusion. A barista at the coffee shop smiled warmly and said, "I love that name." A small child asked if I was in a play. Lisa, of course, documented the entire thing on her phone. At one point, she even convinced a store employee to announce over the PA system, "Linda, your order is ready at the counter." My wife called while we were still there. I put her on speaker so Lisa could hear. "Where are you?" my wife asked. "Mall," I said. Lisa leaned in. "With Linda," she added. There was a long silence. Then my wife sighed. "Should I even ask?" "No," I said. The absurdity reached its peak when a friendly man in a red sweater approached and said, "Hey Linda, remember me? From the fundraiser last year?" Now, I could have corrected him. I could have explained the whole ridiculous story. But honestly, I was curious to see how far it could go. So I smiled, shook his hand, and said, "Of course. How have you been?" We ended up chatting for 10 minutes about some imaginary shared experience involving raffle tickets and a lost umbrella. Lisa nearly fell over laughing. By the time we left, I had not only embraced Linda, but was genuinely enjoying it. There's a certain freedom in being someone else for a while, especially if that someone else has no reputation to protect. Linda could say mildly outrageous things, mispronounce French words without shame, and make terrible puns without fear of social exile. On the way to the car, Lisa patted my shoulder. "See? I told you it'd be fun. Besides, you owe me for the laminated chart. Consider this balance restored." I laughed, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Lisa doesn't believe in balance, only in upping the stakes. Sure enough, the very next day, she texted me a picture of a custom coffee mug she'd ordered. It read, "World's Best Linda." The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and what I thought was peace and quiet. I should have known better. Peace and quiet in my life are usually just camouflage for incoming chaos. I shuffled into the kitchen, hair doing a convincing impression of a dandelion in a windstorm. And there it was, the world's best Linda mug sitting on the counter. My wife was drinking from it, slowly, with deliberate sips, the kind that say, "I'm savoring this, and I want you to see me savor it." "You're drinking out of my mug?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Your mug?" I thought Linda's mug could be shared. I took the mug, poured myself coffee, and sat down. I was trying to look dignified, which is difficult when your coffee cup has pink swirls and glittery lettering. "I see Lisa has been busy," my wife said. "You have no idea," I replied. The truth was, Lisa wasn't just busy, she was on a campaign. At 9:03 a.m., I got my first text of the day. "Linda, the world needs you at the farmer's market." I ignored it. At 9:07, she sent a picture of a hat embroidered with Linda. At 9:09, she sent "We can get matching ones." At this point, ignoring her wasn't going to work. Lisa operates like a raccoon in your attic. You can pretend she's not there, but she's going to keep making noise until you deal with her. So, 2 hours later, I found myself at the farmer's market wearing the Linda hat. My wife had decided to tag along for moral support, which in her language means to watch and laugh. The farmer's market was bustling. People were selling homemade jams, hand-knit scarves, and questionable herbal teas that promised to fix everything from migraines to existential dread. Lisa was there waiting, already armed with another name tag. This one said, Linda 2.0. I thought you might want to upgrade, she said. Do I look like I need a software update? I asked. Yes, she replied without hesitation. We wandered the stalls and I started noticing something strange. People treated Linda differently. Vendors gave me bigger samples. Strangers struck up. Conversations about things like bread recipes and heirloom tomatoes. One woman even offered me a discount because you remind me of my Aunt Linda. It was bizarre. In my normal life, nobody offers me discounts unless it's to encourage me to leave the store faster. Halfway through the market, we ran into a man selling honey. He looked at my name tag and said, Us Linda. The last Linda I knew was a beekeeper. Naturally, I replied, Oh yes, I dabble. This led to an intense 5-minute conversation about hive maintenance and queen bee behavior. I nodded along, throwing in words like pollen and nectar flow, as if I actually knew what I was talking about. My wife stood behind him, mouthing, Stop lying, while Lisa filmed everything for future blackmail purposes. By the time we left, I had acquired 2 jars of honey, a knitted tea cozy shaped like a chicken, and a reputation as someone deeply passionate about apiary science. In the car, my wife finally asked, So, how long are you planning to keep being Linda? I shrugged. Until people stopped giving me free samples. She laughed, but I could see a glint in her eye, the same one she gets before she moves the furniture around, just to see if I'll notice. My wife has the patience of someone who's perfectly happy to let me dig my own hole, and then hand me a bigger shovel. That night, as I was winding down, I got one last text from Lisa. Linda never truly retires. I went to bed knowing that somewhere, somehow, she was already planning the next chapter of this ridiculous saga. 2 days later, I made the tactical error of thinking the whole Linda incident was dying down. I'd gone about my morning as a normal human. No glitter mugs, no embroidered hats, no random farmers market honey enthusiasts. I even thought briefly, maybe Lisa's found a new victim. Then came the knock at the door. It was the kind of knock that's too cheerful for a stranger, but too insistent for a friend. I opened it, and there she was, Lisa, wearing sunglasses, holding a clipboard, and standing in front of what I can only describe as a mobile lemonade stand with wheels. You're coming with me, she said. I'm not, I replied. You are. Linda doesn't turn down community outreach. Before I could even formulate a sentence containing no, never, and over my dead body, my wife appeared in the hallway like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Oh, he's free. Have fun, she said, tossing me my shoes like a prison guard sliding a tray into a cell. 10 minutes later, I was being wheeled down the street. Yes, wheeled in Lisa's lemonade cart, which she claimed doubled as a mobile joy station. I didn't feel joy. I felt motion sickness. The plan, according to Lisa, was simple. We were going to the park where Linda would be running a pop-up lemonade stand for charity. I asked which charity. She said, the Linda Fund. What does the Linda Fund do? I asked. She paused. It keeps you hydrated and slightly confused. We set up under a big oak tree, and she handed me an apron that said, Pouring love since forever. I spent the next hour handing cups of lemonade to strangers who all greeted me like an old friend. Linda, I haven't seen you in years. Linda, you look great. Linda, is this the same recipe from the reunion? I had no idea who these people were, but apparently, I had a storied past I knew nothing about. Lisa, of course, was no help. Every time I whispered, "Who's that?" she would say, "Smile and pour." Halfway through the afternoon, a man in a cowboy hat ambled over. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Linda, you still owe me $20 from poker night." This was a new level of commitment to the bit. I could have told him the truth, that I was not Linda, had never played poker with him, and had $20 firmly in my own possession. But something in me snapped. Instead, I said, "I'll see you next Friday. Bring smaller bills." He grinned, tipped his hat, and walked away. Lisa nearly spilled her own lemonade laughing. Things only escalated from there. A local news crew showed up, doing a segment on wholesome community happenings, and suddenly I was being interviewed. "So, Linda," the reporter said, "what inspired you to do this?" I panicked. My brain scrambled like a cheap radio between stations. "Well," I began, "lemonade is more than a drink. It's an attitude, a zest for life, a tangy reminder that even sour things can be sweetened." It was nonsense, but I delivered it with such conviction that I half believed it myself. When the camera crew left, Lisa whispered, "You're a natural. You might be the best Linda yet." The yet in that sentence concerned me. It implied a long lineage of Lindas, possibly an underground society, maybe even a secret handshake. By the time we packed up, I'd given away about 50 cups of lemonade, accidentally committed to attending 2 reunions I had no connection to, and been invited to teach a life philosophy workshop at the community center. On the walk home, I tried to bring up the idea of retiring Linda for good. "Impossible," Lisa said. "You're part of the brand now. You can't just step out. It's like trying to quit being Santa in the middle of December." I turned to my wife for backup, but she was scrolling through her phone, grinning. "They've already posted your interview," she said. "It's getting shared all over Facebook." When we got home, I opened my own social media and saw the video had been captioned, "Local legend Linda spreads zest for life." That's when I realized the trap I was in. It wasn't just Lisa anymore. The entire neighborhood was in on it. I was Linda now, and I had no idea how to get my real name back. By the next morning, the Linda situation had mutated from a mild inconvenience to a full-scale identity crisis. I woke up to 3 text messages from people I didn't know, all of them addressed to Linda, and one of them containing a picture of a cat in a sweater with the caption, "For the raffle." My wife, sipping her coffee, casually said, "You're trending in the local Facebook group." "I'm what?" She slid her phone across the table. There it was. My face, frozen mid-sentence from yesterday's interview, under the headline, "Meet Linda, the heart of our town." The comment section was alive with speculation, admiration, and, inexplicably, lemon-related puns. Lisa had commented too. "She's more than just a pretty pour." I considered deleting my social media entirely, faking my own disappearance, and starting fresh somewhere remote, like the Yukon. But before I could plan my escape, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Harris from across the street, holding a giant cardboard box. "Linda, these are the flyers for your workshop." I opened the box. Inside were at least 500 neon yellow sheets, each one shouting in bold letters, "Zest for life, a conversation with Linda." I never agreed to— "Don't be modest," she interrupted. "The sign-up sheet is almost full. We had to open a second session." When I asked her who "we" was, she just winked and said, "The committee," like it was some shadowy organization you only hear about in spy novels. Later that day, I spotted Lisa walking toward my house with a bag that clinked suspiciously. "Props," she explained when I asked. "For your talk." "What props?" She pulled out a rubber chicken, a pair of sunglasses shaped like lemons, and a small ukulele. What am I supposed to do with this? Improvise. That's what Alinda does best. I had about 48 hours to prepare for this so-called workshop, and by prepare, I mean wallow in denial. But word of mouth worked faster than my ability to resist. People I barely knew started asking me what topics I'd cover. One man at the grocery store stopped me by the cereal aisle and said, "I've been looking forward to hearing your thoughts on perseverance." "I don't have any thoughts on perseverance," I told him. He laughed like I'd just told the world's funniest joke and said, "Classic Linda." By the time Saturday arrived, I'd resigned myself to my fate. The community center auditorium was packed. Chairs had been dragged in from other rooms. Someone had set up a lemonade stand in the corner because apparently no Linda event is complete without beverages. Lisa acted as my unofficial MC. She stood at the podium and began, "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the woman who can turn sour into sweet, the soul who reminds us to sip, smile, and savor. Linda." The crowd erupted in applause. I stepped onto the stage, holding the ukulele and the rubber chicken, because at this point, why fight it? My opening line was supposed to be simple, something like, "Thank you for coming." But instead, I blurted out, "It's not easy being Linda." Laughter. Real, genuine laughter. The kind that rolls through a room and picks up speed. Encouraged, I launched into an improvised monologue about how lemons are nature's way of keeping us humble, how life hands you citrus whether you want it or not, and how the secret to happiness is to keep your apron clean but your mind open. Halfway through, someone in the audience raised their hand and asked, "Linda, what's your morning routine?" I was about to tell the truth, coffee, muttering, occasional doom scrolling, but Lisa coughed loudly from the sidelines, reminding me that Linda is never mundane. So I said, "I greet the sun with gratitude, play a short melody on my ukulele to honor the day, and then whisper my goals into a lemon before slicing it for tea." Gasps of admiration, nods of approval. A man in the front row actually took notes. By the time I wrapped up, people were lining up to take selfies with me. A teenager asked me to sign her t-shirt. One woman even pressed a lemon into my hand and said, "For inspiration." As the crowd dispersed, Lisa clapped me on the shoulder. "See? You were born for this." I wanted to argue. I wanted to shout my real name from the rooftops and reclaim my life. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew the truth. In this town, you don't stop being Linda. You just learn to wear it better. 2 days after my Zest for Life workshop, the Linda myth reached what I can only describe as cult status. People were quoting me in public, actual quotes I never said. At the bakery, I overheard a man tell his friend, "As Linda says, every pie is just a hug you can eat." I've never said that. I don't even like pie. The local bookstore put up a chalkboard sign that read, "Linda recommends 3 books to squeeze the most from life." I had not recommended anything, but they had apparently guessed what Linda might choose. 1. Zen and the Art of Citrus Maintenance. Definitely not real. 2. Juice Yourself Happy. I hoped it wasn't literal. 3. 50 Shades of Lemon. Definitely, absolutely not me. My wife found the whole thing hysterical. She developed a habit of leaning into the kitchen doorway and saying things like, "Linda, darling, your public awaits," whenever the phone rang. One evening, I got a call from a man named Carl, who introduced himself as the head of something called the Regional Lemon Enthusiasts Association. He said, "We'd like you to be our keynote speaker this year, all expenses paid. Also, we'll be serving lemon bars." I was on the verge of explaining the whole mistaken identity thing when my wife whispered, "Take it. We could use a weekend away." Which is how I found myself, 2 Saturdays later, in a hotel ballroom in front of 300 people wearing citrus-themed clothing. There were lemon earrings, lemon ties, lemon socks. One woman had an entire lemon-printed pantsuit. Carl took the stage before me and gave the warmest, most exaggerated introduction I'd ever heard. "Friends, we are honored to welcome the radiant force behind our recent Zest revolution, Linda." The applause was deafening. I swear someone started chanting my name. I stepped up to the microphone and began, "Thank you so much." From the back, someone yelled, "We love you, Linda." "Thank you," I said again, now unsure whether I should attempt the truth or just ride this out like a rogue wave. I chose the latter. I spoke for 25 minutes about finding your inner lemon, a phrase I invented on the spot. I told them how life is like making lemonade. You need the right balance of sweet and tart, and sometimes you just need to throw in a sprig of mint to keep things interesting. It was pure nonsense, but they lapped it up like I was delivering ancient wisdom from a mountaintop monastery. People were nodding so hard, I feared for their necks. During the Q&A session, a man stood and asked, "Linda, what's your biggest regret?" I opened my mouth, ready to finally come clean and say, "My biggest regret is not correcting people when they first called me Linda." But my eyes landed on a woman in the second row wearing a lemon tiara, and I thought, she looks like she really needs Linda right now. So instead, I said, "My biggest regret is not planting a lemon tree sooner. If you want fruit tomorrow, you have to start digging today." They went wild. Someone actually wiped away tears. After the event, I was mobbed for autographs, advice, and, oddly, recipes. One man pressed a jar of homemade marmalade into my hands like it was a sacred offering. Another insisted I take home a small potted lemon tree to remember us by. Back in the hotel room, my wife poured us each a glass of wine. "You were incredible," she said. "They'll be talking about this for years." "That's the problem," I said. "I'm starting to believe Linda might be more successful than me." She grinned. "Then maybe you should take notes from her." That night, I dreamt I was on a beach somewhere tropical, wearing the lemon sunglasses, strumming the ukulele, and surrounded by adoring fans. It was unsettlingly pleasant. When we returned home, the mailbox was stuffed. Cards, letters, invitations. Someone had sent me a lemon-shaped pillow. Another envelope contained a formal request for me to endorse a new brand of kitchen aprons with the slogan, "Live, Laugh, Linda." And then came the strangest thing of all, a handwritten letter from someone named Doris in a town I'd never heard of. She wrote, "Dear Linda, I don't know if you remember me, but we met once at a farmer's market years ago. I was having a hard time, and you told me that life is just a lemonade stand without customers, until you open your heart. I've never forgotten it. I think about it every day. Thank you for saving me." I put the letter down and stared at the wall for a long time. I'd never met Doris. I'd never said those words, but somehow Linda had, which left me with an uncomfortable realization. Linda wasn't just a mistake anymore. Linda was a movement, and movements are a lot harder to walk away from. The next week, my wife announced over breakfast, "Linda, dear, you've been invited to a podcast." I nearly choked on my toast. "A what now?" "It's called Citrus and Spirit. They want you to talk about your life philosophy." I stared at her. "I don't have a life philosophy. I have a grocery list." She shrugged. "Well, apparently Linda does." So 2 days later, I was sitting in our living room with my laptop balanced on a stack of cookbooks to get the right camera angle, waiting for my Zoom call to connect. The host, a man with the enthusiasm level of a caffeinated game show contestant, greeted me like we were long-lost friends. "Linda, welcome. We are so honored." I had no idea what to say, so I smiled like someone whose dentures were about to fall out. He started with, "Tell us, Linda, when did you first discover the zest mindset?" I blinked. "The zest mindset?" "Yes," he said, clapping his hands like a toddler spotting cake. "Your philosophy that zest is not just in lemons. It's in life." I could have told the truth. I could have said, "I only discovered it the moment you said it." But something in his expectant gaze stopped me. So I leaned forward and said, "Oh, well, it all began when I accidentally bought 10 kilos of lemons instead of one. Life handed me lemons, and I refused to waste them." He gasped as if I had just recited the cure for heartbreak. The interview rolled on, with me making up things at a pace I didn't know I was capable of. I talked about peeling back the rind of negativity and squeezing out the best moments. I coined the phrase, "zest it like you mean it," which he immediately wrote down. By the end, I wasn't even sure where Linda stopped, and I began. After the podcast aired, my inbox exploded. I got emails from strangers telling me I'd inspired them to start new hobbies, quit jobs they hated, or, oddly, buy more citrus. One particularly touching message came from a man in Ohio who said, "Thanks to you, Linda, I've started making my own lemon soap, and my neighbors actually talk to me now." Then there was the less touching one. "Linda, I think you're my soulmate. Please come live with me on my lemon farm." It was accompanied by 17 photos of lemons in suggestive arrangements. I did not reply. By now, my wife was no longer calling me Linda sarcastically. She was calling me Linda as if it were a fact of life, like gravity or the existence of bread. "Linda, the mail's here." "Linda, your fan club sent another package." "Linda, you need to do something about the lemon tree. It's starting to look at me funny." The tree, by the way, was thriving. It had grown so much I suspected it was feeding off the sheer force of Linda's popularity. I wouldn't have been surprised if it sprouted sunglasses and a microphone. Then came the phone call that tipped everything over the edge. It was from a television producer. "Linda, we'd love to have you on our morning show for a segment called Live with Zest. We'll have you make lemonade on air and talk about your philosophy." "On television?" I squeaked. "Yes, this Thursday. And don't worry, we've got a kitchen set ready for you. You'll be a natural." After I hung up, I told my wife, "This is madness. I'm not a TV person. I burn toast. I once put a metal spoon in the microwave." She patted my hand. "That's exactly why they'll love you." Thursday morning, I was in a studio kitchen with blinding lights, 2 grinning hosts, and a bowl of lemons the size of cannonballs. "Linda," one host said as the camera rolled, "what's your secret to a fulfilling life?" I was about to launch into my well-practiced nonsense when I accidentally knocked the lemon bowl. It rolled toward the edge of the counter. I lunged to save it, missed, and the lemons cascaded to the floor in a perfect slow-motion avalanche. The crew froze. The hosts froze. I froze. Then I blurted, "Sometimes life drops all your lemons at once. The trick is to pick them up and make a fruit salad instead." The hosts erupted in laughter. The cameraman was shaking. The director gave me a thumbs up. And just like that, my televised blunder became a viral sensation. Clips of Linda's lemon drop moment flooded social media. Memes sprouted overnight. Someone put my voice over footage of a waterfall. Another set it to dramatic orchestral music. Within a week, a local paper ran the headline, "When Life Drops Lemons, Call Linda." That evening, my wife handed me a cup of tea and said, "You know, you could probably run for mayor now." I laughed. But deep down, I wasn't so sure it was a joke anymore. Because somewhere along the way, Linda had stopped being a misunderstanding and started being a destiny. And that, my friend, is how a single wrong name turned into a whirlwind of laughter, headlines, and more fruit salad jokes than I ever imagined. Life has a way of taking our blunders and dressing them up as opportunities, sometimes even destiny. So as you drift off tonight, remember this. The next time you drop your lemons, don't panic. Just make a fruit salad and maybe a good story while you're at it. If you enjoyed this little adventure, don't forget to subscribe and join me again for more bedtime mischief and laughter. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a small mistake that turned into a story you'll never forget? Share it in the comments so we can all chuckle together. Until next time, sleep well, and may your lemons always fall softly.